Some people, and I mean this without judgment, are genuinely incapable of going to bed at a reasonable hour. It's 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, they have a meeting at 9, and yet there they are, fully awake, reorganizing their bookshelf or watching videos about deep-sea creatures or just staring at the ceiling with a brain that refuses to power down. It's not insomnia, not really. It's not anxiety keeping them up, at least not always. It's something else, something harder to name. They're just awake when the world says they shouldn't be, alert when everyone else has already logged off for the night, and no amount of sleep hygiene articles or well-meaning advice about blue light filters has ever made a meaningful difference. That's the first thing worth acknowledging, the sheer stubbornness of it, because if willpower or discipline could fix this, it would have been fixed already. You've tried. You've set alarms to remind you to start winding down. You've bought blackout curtains and melatonin supplements and done the whole routine where you dim the lights an hour before bed like you're staging a sunset in your own apartment. And still, when midnight rolls around, your brain is just getting started. Here's what most people don't understand about sleep and what almost no one tells you outright. Your sleep schedule is not a choice you're making poorly. It's not a failure of discipline or a sign that you lack self-control. It's a biological timing system, and for some people, that system is set to a completely different clock than the one society runs on. It's called a chronotype, and it's about as voluntary as your height. Chronotype refers to your body's natural preference for when to sleep and when to be awake, and it's driven by your circadian rhythm, that internal roughly 24-hour cycle that regulates not just sleep but body temperature, hormone release, and about 1,000 other processes you're not consciously controlling. Some people have a circadian rhythm that peaks early. They wake up clear-headed at dawn, hit their stride by mid-morning, and start fading by 8 in the evening. Those are your morning larks, and society is built for them. Then there are the people on the other end, the ones whose circadian rhythm runs late. Their body temperature doesn't peak until evening. Their cortisol, which is supposed to spike in the morning to wake you up, barely shows up until noon. Their melatonin, the hormone that makes you sleepy, doesn't start rising until well after dark, sometimes not until 1 or 2 in the morning. These are night owls, and the world is not built for them at all. And this isn't a lifestyle choice or a personality quirk, it's genetic. In 2016, researchers identified specific gene variants associated with delayed sleep phase, the technical term for extreme night owl tendencies. One of the most studied is a variant in the Cry1 gene, which affects how your internal clock syncs with the external day-night cycle. People with this variant have circadian rhythms that run longer than 24 hours, which means their bodies are constantly trying to drift later, like a watch that runs slow. You can force yourself to wake up early, but your biology is still operating on a different schedule, and that mismatch has consequences. The thing is, for most of human history, this variation probably mattered. If you're a small group of people trying to survive the night in an environment full of things that might eat you, having a few people whose brains naturally stay alert after dark is actually useful. Someone needs to keep the fire going. Someone needs to notice if something's moving in the shadows. The night owls weren't broken. They were the night shift, and in that context, their wiring made perfect sense. But we don't live in that context anymore. We live in a world that starts at 9, that schedules meetings for first thing in the morning, that treats sleeping past 7 as a moral failing. And if your biology doesn't align with that, you're left trying to function in a permanent state of social jet lag, which is exactly what it sounds like. Your internal time and the external time are just perpetually out of sync, and your body is caught in the middle. There's research on this, and it's not encouraging. Night owls who are forced into early schedules show higher rates of depression, anxiety, and metabolic issues. They perform worse on cognitive tasks in the morning, not because they're lazy, but because their brains literally aren't online yet. Asking a night owl to be sharp at 8 in the morning is like asking a morning person to do complex problem solving at 2 in the morning. It's possible, but it's effortful and it's not sustainable. And here's the part that makes it worse. Night owls are often told, implicitly or explicitly, that their schedule is a choice, that they're just staying up too late, that they need more discipline. They internalize this. They start to believe that something is wrong with them, that they're failing at something as basic as going to bed on time. But you're not failing. You're just trying to run software that wasn't designed for your hardware. The guilt people feel about this is real and pervasive, and it's worth sitting with for a second. If you're someone who has spent years feeling like you're doing sleep wrong, like everyone else figured out something you didn't, that feeling didn't come from nowhere. It came from a culture that equates early rising with virtue and late sleeping with laziness. A culture that still uses phrases like the early bird gets the worm without irony, as if the only way to be successful is to override your own biology. But there's no moral value to a circadian rhythm. It's just a rhythm. Some people's peaks early, some people's peaks late, and neither is better. They're just different. And the people who thrive in the morning aren't more disciplined. They're just lucky enough to live in a world that accommodates their biology by default. Now, if you're a night owl reading this and thinking, okay, fine, but I still have to function in the real world, you're right. And that's the frustrating part, because understanding why you're wired this way doesn't change the fact that your job starts at 9 or that your kids need to be at school by 8. But there are things that help, and they're not the things most sleep advice focuses on. The first is just knowing. Knowing that this is your chronotype, that it's not a flaw, that you're not broken. That alone can lift some of the guilt, and guilt, it turns out, is terrible for sleep. The second is working with your rhythm instead of against it wherever possible. If you have any flexibility in your schedule, use it. If you can start work later, do it. If you can shift your most demanding tasks to the afternoon or evening when your brain is actually awake, do that. If you can't, if you're locked into an early schedule, then the goal isn't to become a morning person. It's to minimize the damage. Light exposure in the morning can help shift your rhythm earlier, but only slightly. Keeping your sleep schedule consistent, even on weekends, can reduce some of the social jet lag. Avoiding bright light and screens late at night can help, though for true night owls, this often feels like closing the barn door after the horse has left, because the problem isn't that you're keeping yourself awake, it's that your body doesn't want to sleep yet. And this is where I think the conversation needs to shift, because the solution isn't individual, it's structural. We live in a society that treats one chronotype as the default and everyone else as defective, and that's a choice we're making collectively. There's no reason most office work needs to start at 9. There's no reason school needs to start at 8, especially for teenagers whose circadian rhythms naturally shift later during adolescence. The research on this is overwhelming. Later school start times improve academic performance, reduce depression, lower car accident rates among teen drivers. And yet we keep doing it the old way because that's how it's always been done, because morning people don't see the problem. If you're someone who comes alive at night, who does your best thinking after dark, who feels most like yourself when the rest of the world is asleep, you're not malfunctioning. You're not undisciplined or lazy or failing at adulthood. You're just a night owl in a morning lark's world, and that's exhausting, but it's not your fault. Your brain is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's just doing it on a schedule that doesn't fit the template. And the template, not you, is the thing that needs to change. There are worse things than being awake when the world is quiet, than having your peak hours fall outside of business hours, than being wired for the night shift in a species that needed one. You're not broken. You're just mistimed, and maybe in a different world that timing would be exactly right.